We now return to a lot of voices. The man who claimed to be an inspector that day was definitely not his man. He's right, see, you think he would forget his grand lips, huh? I never leave Fresno Street, alright, so I've no interest in any red-headed leak. I'm all alone in the world, me. I've no kinfolk or nothing. Why would I be involved in something like that? Just look at me, eh? Does it look like I could carry off a disguise with a face like this?
It would certainly appear that we have the wrong man.
What have I been telling you? There is no need for this pointless testimony. That's right, I'm just a simple peddler, remember? Fresno Street's all I know. How would I have become to be a boy? How would I come by a police inspector's identification book, eh? Well, yes, that's hard to explain, but...
A brief cross-examination, I think, counsel. Very brief.
Isn't there anyone in this courtroom who thinks I might be onto something? I stand steadfastly at your side as always, Mr. Naruhodo. Alright.
Hold it!
So you say, but how can you be quite so certain? There is no need to have your hands on the desk, monsieur. Surely the reason is obvious, no? Because I have never seen before lips like this. Well, seen lips like this. Nevertheless, there's a clear red mark around Mr. Gossip's neck, and it looks very much like that left behind on the neck of your colleague by your prized collar. Monzio, with your words, it is like you're trying to wring my neck. It does seem very much like my neck, though, eh? Oh, now, this is a birthmark, lad. The biggest lips in London and a neck to die for. They broke the mold when they made me. Was the first time in my life. I feel lucky to have been born with the red hair. And I thought being Japanese made you stand out in London. So you maintain that you've never seen this man before. I swear to it by the flames of my hair. So fierce pride has outgrown the frustration with your hair now, has it? Is right, you think we'll forget these lips? Well, yes, I don't imagine I'll forget those lips in a hurry either. That is what I'm saying. For some reason, it makes me want to eat. How Fabian call it, an eclair. You know. I've never seen the hair as black as yours before either. Likewise, I'd never seen red hair like yours until I came to Britain. Now see, maybe it's a national trait, huh? Maybe all the people from this immense country have got the grander lips. No, lad, I was born right here in Fresno Street and I've never left. Oh, well, that's the problem, see? So you definitely didn't go back to the park on Lime Street that day, Mr. Gossip? Now, how many times do you want me to say it, eh? I never leave Fresno Street.
Hold it!
So you've heard of the Red-Headed League, had you? You don't get a name like Gossip for nothing, eh? It's my business to know what's going off in town. I sold that tasty tidbit to a fair few redheads that came past me. Just between us, I even got Sandwich to cough up for it. Well, he does have a very large red nose, if that counts. Who knows? But as you can see, my own hair's not got a hint of red in it. And in any case, Fresno Street's my patch. You won't catch me sidling off to some other part of town? No, sir, not likely.
Excuse me!
Mr. Derousseau. Oui, can I help you? Did Mr. Gossip's words just now lead you to remember something relevant, perhaps? It was the other day when I was looking for a place near the park, a small house or something. To be the headquarters of your red-headed league, yes. I visited an housing agent on Lime Street and there I saw him. This man was paying money to the agent. What? Mr. Gossip with a housing agent? Oui. He has some kind of contract in his hand, and they were clearly discussing terms. No, you're mistaken, chum. I've never left Fresno Street, mate. Like I said before, you've mistaken me for someone else. Someone with the same face. I know, the cap was right. I remember it too. He was paying the man with the banknotes. With notes. Like I said, that wasn't me. I was curious why this man with the dirty clothes had so much money. So I looked at the name on the papers. And what name was written? Mr. Gossip? No, this man here lies. He tells you that he has no name. But in fact, his name is Hugh Boone, eh? Is better than Mr. Gossip, I think, see? No. I'm a peddler of tidbits of information, like I said, on Fresno Street, and that's that. I don't much like folk talking about my personal life.
Indeed, and it is not the intention of the court to invade the privacy of witnesses. Very well, I shall respect your wishes, sir. The aforementioned name shall be redacted from all court records of this trial, assuming no objections.
I'm sorry, my lord, but the defense does object. Because the name just mentioned has a very deep significance to this case.
Good gracious, do you similarly object, Prosecutor Osogi?
As it happens, my lord, that particular name has already been mentioned during today's proceedings.
Well, I never. In what capacity?
Hugh Boone, the name of the leaseholder of the room. Let me put this very simply. The victim's body was discovered in your rented room. I suggest, sir, that you start talking. Well, all right. I suppose that might be the case, So your real name is Hugh Boone. Well, just between us, I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but there's no finer peddler of tidbits in town. So I happen to be able to afford a grubby little room in a fallen down back street townhouse.
You do?
And once every 6 months I go and pay the rent to the agent on Lime Street. Oh, I remember now. There were 2 vulgar redheads in there last time. Hey, if either of us is a vulgar, it's not me. Think again, Peppino. Why didn't you bring this up before? It's like I told you already. I don't like talking about my personal life. I'm a tidbit peddler as far as everyone else is concerned. No fuss.
You will update your testimony to include this most surprising revelation, Mr. Boone.
If I must. So the leaseholder Scotland Yard has been looking for since the body was discovered has been here under our noses all along. I rented the room where this fellow was found. True, but for what difference it makes?
Hold it!
So, you live in that room presumably, do you? No, I don't live there. What do you think? There's no bed, is there? Just a desk. Then why would you want to rent it? Well, I don't think I should have to say, really. Then how about the notice board in there? Which was covered from top to bottom in confidential documents only the police should have had access to. Oh, no, that board's not mine. The inspector must have brought it along. It's the only other bits and bobs that belong to me. If only the other bits and bobs belonged to me, the desk and the chair and that. People don't generally carry enormous notice boards around with them. The real question is, why was Inspector Gregson killed there in your room? Well, obviously, I've got not the faintest idea. I mean, it's causing me no end of bother, to be honest. It seems to me that Mr. Boone would rather as little is known about his room as possible for some reason. Yes, it does come across that way, and more importantly, knowing that the scene of the crime is actually his room completely changes things. In particular, there's one part of his testimony that's really bothering me now. That's how I'm finally going to undo this man. I'm all alone in the world, me. I have no kinfolk and nothing.
Hold it!
You mean you have no family? No, none at all. So I spent my days on Fresno Street peddling titbits to passers-by. Hoping, just between us, this is, and eventually someone else with lips like mine will come along. I don't think so. You may be right. Anyway, that mark on your neck is just too much of a coincidence for us to ignore. Well, what's the fella to do then, eh? If you don't believe me, we're at an impasse. And there's nothing I can do but flick me lip. Looks like I'm not going to get anywhere here, unless I can produce some proof. You're basically saying I got dressed up and posed as some fancy inspector, aren't you? Well, it's beyond me. How do you think I could do that? Just look at me. Do you look like a carry on for disguise? Maybe you could, say, with a mustache or a beard to cover up that lip. Why, perhaps. But if I was going to stick some fake facial hair on to cover up this fine specimen, I'd end up looking like his lordship over there, wouldn't I? Lordship.
Pardon, I assure you my lips are entirely unremarkable, and I would ask you not to cast such scrutinizing looks in my direction, Counsel.
Sorry, my lord. My imagination got the better of me there. Well, Inspector Gregson did wear a mustache, of course. You're right, he did. So perhaps he was hiding something himself. He could barely have hidden a crumb in a mustache of that size. And anyways, the detective we spoke with had no facial hair at all. I see, the capo is alright. He was a clean-shaven.
It certainly seems beyond the realms of possibility that this witness could have disguised himself as the victim.
Aye, it does and it is. That's the extent of their testimony, is it? What's your feeling, Mr. Naruhodo? Well, what Mr. Boone says is undeniable. It would be all but impossible to hide those lips with any form of disguise. Perhaps, yes, but nevertheless, the mark around his neck is equally undeniable, and it's identical to the one that Mr. DeRossi suffered. Yes, that's true. But why does this whole disguise idea just keep playing on my mind? Alright. Well, so what else did we have in the room? Inspector's watch, the notice board, the policeman's key, a police revolver, a framed photo of Mrs. Vigil. Mrs. Vigil was looking for Mr. Vigil, her missing husband. Mr. Vigil was the guy that got fired, right? So I guess we can ask about that when he says, I'm all alone in the world. Pray tell, what's this all about?
Objection!
If you have no kinfolk, as you put it, then explain why it is that among the sparse furnishings we found this photograph in the room. I guess he's even got the hair, doesn't he? I presume, as you've been renting the room, that this photograph belongs to you, does it not? Oh, well... Mr. Boone, drop the pretense and tell the court exactly who you really are. Oh, I don't know what you mean. Oh, I'm a peddler. I keep telling you so. You really don't need to bother with me. Please, just leave it alone. The man says, leave it alone. Whatever the truth is about this man's life, it has no bearing on this case. Because it's simply not possible that he impersonated Inspector Gregson. How can you be so sure? Just look at the man. No amount of disguise could ever hide those unmissable features. But what if we were to look at this the other way around? What do you mean?
Yes, counsel, what do you mean?
Well, there's no denying Mr. Boone's lip is very prominent indeed. But consider the possibility that his prominent lip is itself part of an elaborate disguise. Then hiding that prominent feature, in other words revealing his true face, would make an utterly impenetrable disguise. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Hugh Boone?
Witness, are you still hiding the truth from this court?
If that's a disguise, then underneath it, his true identity must be... Yes, that's right. There's really only one person he could really be. My lord, the defense believes it can reveal Mr. Boone's true identity to the court. Oh, please, no.
Very well then, counsel. What is the true identity of this peddler who goes simply by the name of Gossip on the street?
Take that!
Your real name is actually Mr. Vigil, isn't it? Mr. Daily Vigil.
I don't recall that name, counsel. Who is this Mr. Vigil?
It's a name I encountered yesterday, my lord. It has to do with a certain client of Mr. Herlock Sholmes. A young gentlewoman came to the detective asking him to locate her missing husband. The woman in this photograph, in fact. This is Mrs. Vigil. What? From what I understand, you haven't returned home since the night before the inspector was found dead. But of course, on that night, you were being held captive by the two Red-Headed League men. And last night you were put up by the prosecution service in preparation for testifying in this trial, because we'd been led to believe that you, Miss Venus, and Mr. Sandwich were all homeless. Being important witnesses in this case, we needed to know where we could find you, of course. And that explains why you've not only been unable to return home, but also unable to contact your wife, who's been beside herself with worry waiting for you at the Vigil residence. Now, just hold on a minute. The first, what I'm talking about, really. No idea what they're talking about. I wish it wouldn't auto switch over like that. Like it cuts the dialogue before I can finish reading it. It's a simple enough matter to confirm my suspicions. All we have to do is pull off that disguise. No, please.
Bailiff, bring soap, a sponge, and a washbowl at once. Mr. de Rousseau and Mr. de Rossi, you will restrain the witness.
Oui, my lord.
Si, my lord.
No, stop.
Get off. Don't. Well, we are now seeing your true features, I presume.
Lift your head, sir, so the court can see your face.
It would appear that the defense counsel's assertion was entirely correct. This has all been a very elaborate deception. So, witnesses, tell the court. Have you seen this man before?
I don't believe it, but... I see, there is no question. This is the inspector we saw in the park.
Extraordinary.
On the day of the Red-Headed League enrollment, the man claiming to be Inspector Gregson, who appeared before Mr. De Rousseau and Mr. De Rossi in the park, was you disguised as the inspector, or rather, was you posing as the inspector in no disguise at all. Mr. Vigil was formerly employed as the chief warder at Barclay Prison.
Chief Warder? Then your career had promise. Why, you would quite possibly have become the future governor of the prisoner. What on earth have you been doing peddling tittle-tattle on Fresno Street?
Well, it's been 10 years since Mr. Vigil worked at the prison. 10 years. I'm really dreadfully sorry about all this. Now I can't give him the list because of the lips. Yes, it's true. I am Daily Vigil. And you were the chief warder at Barclay Prison 10 years ago. So where did Mr. Hugh Boone come from?
Boone is... the other me. It's a name I invented. Well, evidently there's a great deal under the surface here. I'll explain everything. I'll tell you just how wretched my life has become. As you say, it was 10 years ago now that my employment at Barclay's chief warder came to an end. Having left the prison service, I searched for some new occupation by which to earn a wage. The times were hard in London, and I found no suitable engagements at all. In desperation one day, I turned my hand at selling wares on Fresno Street.
But your wife appears to know nothing of this. She still maintains that you are the chief warder at Barclay Prison.
I was utterly determined that my wife should not know of my failings, which is why I've never told her. I opened an account at the bank under the name of Hugh Boone, and I rented the cheapest room I could find on Fresno Street.
The scene of the very crime we're investigating.
Yes, that's right. A place from which I could emerge every morning at 8 as a squalid peddler, and transform myself back every evening at 5 into a well-dressed man about town before returning home. That quickly became my daily routine.
I was puzzled by the lack of furniture in the room. But that explains it. But why on earth didn't you just tell us this in the first place?
I have a wife, sir, and 2 sons. And without wishing to sound self-conceited, they regard me with some pride. I couldn't bring myself to disappoint them.
So instead, you decided to conceal your occupation from them.
Yes. I've made such a terrible mess of everything.
Still, one thing doesn't add up. No matter how many tidbits of information you could be selling to passing gentlemen, even at 6 pence apiece, you couldn't hope to match the salary you must have commanded as chief warder at the prison.
Very true. To have kept your family in comfort despite 10 years of somewhat misbegotten employment. That was all thanks to Inspector Gregson.
What? Inspector Gregson? What on earth?
It was some years after I'd invented Boone and begun my other life as a street peddler. The inspector, that is, recognized me one day. You mean to say the victim was an acquaintance of yours? I knew him from my time working at the prison. When he saw what I'd become,
Put a little bit of lisp back in there.
he was deeply troubled for me and my family, and from that day forward, he visited me on Fresno Street with increasing regularity. And one day, he asked me if I would carry out a secret assignment for him.
A secret? What was it?
I was to impersonate the inspector.
Nani? Impersonate him?
We always met in that little room so the inspector could brief me.
Visit Orxes tomorrow?
Oh fuck. Now I've got to do his voice and take a statement from the proprietorist. There was always something along those lines. Surveillance work, interviewing people. On those occasions, he would lend me his identification so people would believe who I was. My instructions were to make an impression. Let people know that Inspector Gregson had been at work. And for those services, he compensated me financially.
The Scotland Yard inspector willingly relinquished his identification into your care with intent to deceive. As I'm sure I need not point out, is a very serious criminal offense.
But why? What was the point of you impersonating him?
Well, I truthfully do not know. All I can say is that the inspector warned me on numerous occasions. Now remember, Vigil, I need your solemn word. You don't blab about this to anyone, alright? Ever. Even if I end up a croaker.
Well, you didn't keep that promise, did you, Vigil?
In time, he started to bring papers with him to the room as well. It became something of a second office for him.
So, in fact, the person who declared himself to be Inspector Gregson at the park on Lime Street was really...
Yes, it was me, acting on the inspector's orders. As usual, I removed my boon disguise, and then went as instructed to the park, armed with the inspector's identification book. It never occurred to me that the bruise on my neck would give me away.
Well, it would seem this confession completely destroys the defense's case.
Explain yourself, Prosecutor Asogi.
My learned friend's assertion was as follows. The victim was killed at another location on the day before his corpse was discovered, at the hands of these two red-headed league men when they imprisoned the inspector.
But no, that can't be. After all, it wasn't the inspector who went to the park that day, it was me.
Oh, goodness. Finally, we have clarity.
We had nothing to do with this murder of the inspector.
And merci, Monsieur de la Fence. De la Défense, you're for proving it.
Indeed, it would appear that we have reached a de facto conclusion of sorts. These witnesses had no involvement in the murder of the victim, as proven, somewhat ironically, by the defense. I hereby call an end to the cross-examination.
Hold it!
So now we have no leads on who killed him. Pardon me, my lord, but with your permission, I would like to pose one further question to the witness.
Kazuma?
What question, counsel?
It concerns the events of 10 years ago. I believe you would have been present at a very significant execution that was carried out at the time.
10 years ago?
Execution of the professor, Inshin Asogi. I want to know exactly what your involvement was. Oh, answer me, man.
One moment, counsel. Is this related to the current case?
Naturally. It is the prosecution's belief that this case and the events of 10 years ago are inextricably linked.
Does the defense concur, counsel?
Kazuma, not yourself. You're not as calm and as collected as usual. Also, you're alive, so... Oh, Kazuma-sama, no wonder he's acting this way. Mr. Vigil's memories of what happened 10 years ago would tell the tale of Genshin Asogi's last moments. His own father. I know, I do understand that, but even so... Prosecutor Asogi, do you genuinely believe that this question requires an answer in order to learn the truth behind Inspector Gregson's death? I need you to trust me, please. Very well, then the defense has no objection.
I see. In that case, you will answer the question, witness.
The truth is, I remember very little of that time. You've forgotten? Hey, Mr. Amnesia, give him a break. I'm sorry to say, yes. As I said, I resigned from my role at the prison 10 years ago. For some peculiar reason, my memory of the events leading up to that moment is extremely hazy. Does that not strike you as strange, Mr. Naruhodo? Sorry. Now, 10 years is a long time, but to have forgotten the reason why he left such an important job... Yes, you're right. And not only that, Mr. Vigil's claim contradicts what we already know. The human spirit is a fragile thing. It's broken all too easily. Which is why we have a tendency to wrap it up for protection. Sorry, the human spirit? I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean. When we experience pain and suffering that we feel unable to bear, we block it out, obliterate it from our memories, seal it away. But it never truly leaves us. If the seal is broken, the memories resurface, and when they do, that fragile spirit may finally be crushed. But I really don't. Kazuma-sama. But if it must be crushed, then so be it, because the truth will not stay buried. It's coming out one way or another. Right. Now I understand. It's clear what his intentions are. He means to expose the truth, at any cost. Perhaps if I pointed out the contradiction in what Mr. Vigil claimed earlier, it might cause some crucial memories to return to him. But should I? Should I present the evidence or not? Well, yeah. I have no idea how this is going to go, but this is a court of law, and I have a duty to pursue the truth. Mr. Vigil, I'd like you to look at this. Evidence that clearly contradicts your version of events. Well, it'd have to be his dismissal. Why would you forget this? Just a few moments ago, you made the following statement. I resigned from my role at the prison 10 years ago. Oh, well, yes. He was dismissed. In other words, you claim to have left the post of chief warder of your own volition. Well, yes, of course. Why? Tell me. Do you remember seeing this document before? No, I don't. This is a dismissal notice ordering the immediate termination of a prison staff member's employment. A dismissal notice. And the name on the notice is yours, Mr. Vigil. What? What? It's mine. So you didn't resign from the prison service at all. For some reason, you were dismissed as chief warder from Barclay. No, there's been some mistake. I'm sure. I'm sure I tendered my resignation. This dismissal notice is nonsense. Isn't it? If you were forcibly dismissed, there must have been good reason. Clearly, you did something. The
Mr. Vigil, it's time to break the seal and have you remember. This is so long and drawn out. According to the few remaining records, the final execution that you supervised was on the 17th of June 10 years ago, and on that day, something very serious took place at Barclay Prison.
The 17th of June?
Was that the professor's execution? You know it was, Naruhodo.
Professor?
As you were the chief warder at the time, it stands to reason that you would have been present throughout the proceedings.
It does sound familiar.
And yet, that execution never took place. The convict, ostensibly executed earlier that day, later re-emerged from his grave.
The convict came back to life?
In the cemetery in the middle of the night, there was a witness. However, the witness claims that a moment after he saw the convict clambering out of his grave, a gunshot rang out from over his shoulder, and the bullet pierced the professor's chest, killing him instantly. Those may have been the professor's actual last moments.
Yes.
Seeing as you were in charge of overseeing executions at the time, you must know the truth about what really happened. It's in your head, somewhere deep down. Well, Chief Warder Daily Vigil? Seriously, what is wrong with his hand? Why didn't they make him have a fist? Why is his hand like that? I know there are memories in your head that can explain what happened on the 17th of June 10 years ago, and now it's time for you to drag them up.
Mr. Vigil.
Cripes, can we get on with it?
Yes, the whole prison, it was complete chaos. The prisoner escaped. He was killed in the cemetery. The shocking news ripped through Barclay like a hurricane.
What?
Do you mean to say, Mr. Vigil, that your memories of the time have returned? Go ahead, It's like some floodgates have been reopened. The images, the screams.
Oh my goodness.
Papers. There were reports, articles about a man who'd seen a ghost.
Yes, Enoch Drebber.
But surely those reports were exaggerated. There were traces at the scene.
Traces of what?
In Lowgate Cemetery at plot number 139. Blood. Lots of blood. That's where the man was buried, of course. Obviously, something terrible had happened there. The depths of conspiracy and depravity from which this tale is emerging are quite staggering.
I've reviewed the police records from that time extensively. A thorough investigation was conducted by Scotland Yard to ascertain how the convict managed to escape in the first place. And the conclusion reached by the investigating team was that a member of the prison staff must have been involved.
Are you suggesting that the prison warder abetted the man's bid for freedom? Yes, and I was suspected of doing it. Of using that mass murderer's execution as a way to help him escape.
You did what?
Remember now. The horror of it all is coming back to me. One evening, a few days after the execution, some detectives came to the prison. I was called to the governor's office at the top of the watchtower.
Ah, shit. I'm sorry, Daly. This is a serious business, but I can help you now.
As Chief Warder, you were responsible for overseeing the execution of 4, eh? Well, it seems the fellows at Scotland Yard want to have a few wee words with you about it. You better pack your things, laddie. You're to attend in person.
As soon as he told me that, my mind just went completely blank. And the next thing I knew, The Professor, the most hated killer in our country's history. And I let him escape. I'm finished. My life is over.
Horrifying.
Order! Bailiff, fetch a doctor at once. Court is adjourned for today with immediate effect.
So, with Mr. Vigil's collapse, proceedings came to an abrupt end for the day. Once again overshadowed by the legacy of that notorious killer, appearing like a cursed ghost ship on a foggy ocean. Lord Van Zeeks, Mr. Vigil, Cosima, and Gregson. All of them bound by invisible chains anchored to the same wreckage in the murky depths of the past. But the miraculous light that had been trying to cut through the gloom and shine on those tragic events was playing on the edges of the truth at last.
It's over. For now. Cripes. Alright. Let's put it here. I will see you next time.